Welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, untagging yourself from photos of your hair metal days on Facebook, or else a scrappy upstart, taking a picture of yourself in the studio with the caption, "My office for the day," this is your show, because ultimately it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. What's up, everybody? It's the last Friday of February 2019. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us. Today's show marks the beginning of our fourth year. We started this program 3 Februaries ago with our episode on the great and mighty Joe Ely, and I'll tell you that this program has brought nothing but joy into my life. The best part about it for me is that it's made other musicians and songwriters feel like they can always just come up to me and just start chatting, even if we haven't met before. So if I'm at a festival or at a club or just at a party, I just feel like I've made a lot of new friends. So I'd like to thank you guys so much for listening to the program. I know there's a lot of other things that you could do with your time, but you choose to listen to this, and I'm grateful. And I'd like to thank all the guests. Now there's 37 of them for giving me their time and attention. It's a real gift, so thank you. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming months, here's where I'll be. March 2nd in Montclair, New Jersey, March 28th in Austin, Texas, the 29th in Houston, March 31st in Dallas. If you're a listener to this show but you've never heard any of my songs before, we should rectify that. That's my main deal anyway. And a good place to do that is over at Spotify. Just search for the words Intro to Joe Pug, and a playlist will come up with a curated playlist of my songs from all of my different albums over the years that will give you a good idea of what I'm all about musically. Finally, if you're a listener to this show and you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. So you just head over to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. It's basically a voluntary subscription, a subscription that you don't have to pay, but you just choose to pay because you dig the show. And over there you can grab a sweet Working Songwriter t-shirt, and you can listen to all of the bonus content that we've put up, an alumni show with BJ Barham, audio of the live podcasts I did in New York City, the first 2 episodes of the Oaks Chamber, and this month, a Working Songwriter alumni show with also the great and mighty John Moreland. We caught up on the phone this week. So jump over there to do that. If you're not in a place where you can contribute financially, that's cool. You don't have to subscribe there. I just ask that you would leave us a review in iTunes, which is free, or tell a friend about the show who you think would dig it. That's free too. And on those 2 things, the simple math is that will help me out much more than it will be a pain in the ass for you. So I hope you can take the time to do that. Thank you. That's all the harassment I have, and I really hope you enjoyed this month's episode. My guest this month is a former staff writer in Nashville who is now hanging his own shingle and leaning into a burgeoning solo career. Sean McConnell grew up in Massachusetts. Both of his parents were folk singers, and music was an integral part of their household. After attending college in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, he moved to Nashville and signed a publishing deal with Warner Chappell. His songs have been recorded by Meatloaf, Tim McGraw, Martina McBride, Rascal Flatts, Plain White Tees, Brad Paisley, the list goes on and on. His songs have also appeared in the ABC television show Nashville. Last year, the song Mercy, which he co-wrote with Brett Young, went to #1, marking the first time one of his songs has topped the charts. Punching the clock as a staff writer never stopped Sean from pursuing a recording career of his own, as he has over a dozen releases to his name. His music has resonated particularly strongly in the red dirt scene down in Texas and Oklahoma, where he tours often with the likes of Wade Bowen, the Randy Rogers Band, and on headlining runs of his own. He's recorded for Rounder and Big Picnic Records. No Depression has called the songs on his latest album sincere and inspiring. American Songwriter says the album features his most soulful vocals to date, and Rolling Stone Country has called him one of the nation's most acclaimed songwriters. Sean and I spoke last fall, but we held this episode in our back pocket because we wanted to wait for the release of his new album, Secondhand Smoke, this month. We're thankful to Sean for sitting down and taking the time to tell us about his musical journey so far. And creation was a part of your household growing up. Both of your folks were musicians, right?
Yeah. My dad was and is a songwriter, guitar player. My mom has a gorgeous voice. And so I'm one of 4 kids, and a huge part of our life was, I think it was up until maybe me or my younger sister was born. There was a time where I think music was the main income. My folks were playing coffee houses and bars, and we were going with them to shows, and
wow,
always having, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because we had a dining room table in our little house in Massachusetts, and many, many nights throughout the year, all their band buddies would be there. They'd be working up songs or writing or just jamming. And that we were just like soaked in that for our childhood. We'd be falling asleep like in the living room while people were playing music all night long. And then on the weekends, just watching my dad songwriting and, yeah, I don't know.
What's it been like for him to watch you continue on in that vein and take it to another level?
I think I'm going to stumble here because we're not in the most amount of contact these days. But that said, I think he's super proud, and I think it's like anyone would be. When you see your child like following and doing the family business, it makes you happy, and to reach certain levels, I think it'd be a pretty amazing thing for a parent to see, for sure.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a validation of what they were into, that you would be around that and take it so much to heart that you'd make it your life's work. That's a pretty ringing endorsement, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, and especially for him, because he was a sounding board as a songwriter. Other than artists that I listened to, there's probably nothing that was more of a sharpening blade than my dad's critiques of my songs. Which,
really?
Yeah. And I mean that in a good way, but also an honest way. It was definitely part of my process growing up. Was, hey, listen to this, and he'd be like, "Wow, that's really great. You might want to think about this or that."
So it was a constructive criticism thing. It wasn't a tear you down type deal?
No, not at all. It was like a passion of his to help me to craft a song.
Wow.
And it was very, it's funny to be thinking about it now. I haven't thought about that piece of it in a long time, but it was very helpful. And it was like a daily songwriting workshop.
Not a lot of people have that, man. That's pretty serious.
Yeah, it was serious. It was not for the faint of heart either. It was very true criticism and praise at the same time, and encouragement. How many people can say that both of my parents were amazingly encouraging of music, as it was never a question what I was supposed to do, or if that could even be a thing. I never had to ask the question, can people do music as a living? Because my parents did.
Right. No, totally.
So I was just like, okay, cool.
Well, one of the things I want to talk to you about today, and obviously, you know, we've talked before. You know what the show is usually like. It's usually me talking to singer-songwriters that mainly just hit the road and play their own songs, and that's how they make their living. And that's one part of your career. You have that. But you have this whole other part where you write songs for other people and with other people that I have no idea about. I have no idea how that world works or what it's like, and I'd really like to drill down on that with you today. How did you end up in that world in Nashville?
Randomly, I've always written songs from a really young age, always by myself, as most of us do, you know, just grow up, you start writing songs and you hone your craft. And I did that for years and years and years. And, but the kind of writing for other people and co-writing thing happened out of college, where I sang on, I wrote a song with a guy named Dave Barnes, who's another artist.
I opened for Dave Barnes 12 years ago in Indianapolis.
No way.
Random connection, but yeah. Yeah, man.
Of course. That's how it works. So yeah, we wrote a song together, and he was taking a meeting with a publisher the next day, and one of the songs he played them was the song that we wrote, and I was singing the demo of. And so that person, Alicia Pruitt at Warner Chappell, who we ended up working together for a decade, she heard my voice, wanted to know who I was, what I was doing. So I was actually still in college at this point, and I drove up to Nashville. We had a meeting. I didn't even know what a publishing deal was. She explained to me, you know, people make a living writing songs, and this was all news to me. I wasn't really too aware of how that all worked. And I actually politely declined for quite a while. I didn't know if it was something I wanted to do.
Why'd you decline?
Just, you know, with publishing, the ownership piece of that, back then I'm 19 or 20 and leery of anybody owning my music. That feels like a really weird thing.
Yeah.
And it still does. You know, that's a weird part of the puzzle. But that was the thing for me that really made me pause, and I had to mull over, you know, the pros and cons of that. As a creative person, that scared me, you know.
What got you past that hesitation?
I trusted Alicia a lot. I trusted the vision that she was expressing, how I could fit into that world. And financially, you know, it was a great, you know, for a newly married kid, making the ends meet. It was great for that. It was the first time I would have steady money that wasn't, you know, going and playing coffee houses or bars or something like that. And
so did they
exciting.
set you up, like it wasn't necessarily in advance, it was a deal where they pay you monthly to just write on staff?
Well, the way that it's structured, and that a lot of them are structured, is it is like an annual amount, but you get paid monthly, like a paycheck. But it is like a draw from the publishing company. And
that is that versus, that's against money that your songs would bring in the future?
Right. Yep.
Okay. You really have to, like, I genuinely have no idea what this world is like, so I'm going to be asking pretty rudimentary questions to you here.
Yeah, no problem. I had zero idea how any of this worked back then. It's a very untalked about part of the music business, unless you're in Nashville, when it's everything everybody talks about.
Well, so what was that vision that and kind of overall strategy that your rep there at the company was laying out for you that sealed the deal? Like what did she kind of envision for you?
Mostly, it was mostly the assurance that she understood who I was as an artist, and that what that was they weren't asking me to do something other than that. So that was my biggest thing was, I'm very happy if other people want to record these songs. And I'm very happy to work with those people to write songs, but I don't want to be in a position where I'm writing songs that I wouldn't normally write naturally. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And she totally got that. And in addition to that, my artist career was something that she was helping me with too. So I just trusted her with my art, with what I wanted to do, and that I could be an honest writer, and that it would still be something that could work inside of the publishing world.
So what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Are you getting up and going to an office building and pouring a cup of coffee and going into a cubicle? Are you writing at your house? Are you going to people's studios? What did your day-to-day life look like when you first started with that contract?
When I first started, it was very much like the first example you just gave. It's, driving in, there's writing rooms that are a little bit bigger than cubicles, but not a whole lot bigger. Mm-hmm. And at least when I first signed, it was my first time being set up with other people to write on a daily basis. And it's a pretty intense schedule. It was 4 or 5 days a week, and you are writing with a different person every day. And you walk into a room and you have a cup of coffee and you talk a little bit. It's the weirdest thing in the world when you really think about how we create, to walk into a room with someone that you don't know, mm-hmm. and then be expected to create a song. It's from the outside, it's such a weird thought, but especially in the beginning there when I was younger and it was brand new. But yeah, it's that's what it was. You wake up every day, you go meet someone, you write a song, and you come home.
What creatively, when you were doing it that way, it sounds like you would do it another way later on, and we'll talk about that in a second. But at first, working like that day in, day out with people that you didn't know, switching people day to day, what creative muscles did that strengthen for you, and what creative muscles did that atrophy for you?
I mean, the practice, it's definitely like sharpening a tool. With that kind of, starting that type of writing process, you write a song a day, so it definitely taught me and strengthened that muscle of, you wake up and you sit and you try to write. Whether or not you get something good or whether or not the magic happens is another type of question. But to wake up and know that today I'm writing a song, and to do that for years is obviously you hone that skill. That was a big plus on that side of things. It was a boot camp for sure.
And how about on the atrophy side? Do you feel like it made you? Do you feel like there was like some crutch tendencies that you'd go to there, or was it all uniformly positive?
I think the only negative, or one of the negatives, that presented itself as the years went on, is just checking yourself. That there needs to be seasons where you're not writing. For me, at least, when it starts to feel like work, I'm not going to create good art. So I needed to learn that there's a point you hit where you need to clear the calendar or not have a calendar and not be writing. So that was, it got to be a little much at some points, and I had to learn that lesson. And then the other one would be, and to the point of what my fears were in the beginning of a publishing deal, just checking myself that when you're writing songs, when it wasn't writing for me, but I was writing for songs that are going to be pitched for radio or for records, all of a sudden there is a framework that people want a song to fit inside of. And my whole thing from the beginning was, I don't want to try to write a song that fits inside that framework. I just want to do what I do, and then you guys can find homes for it. So as the years go on, and as you see people getting certain things, I had to constantly gut check myself. Am I creating art that I'm proud of, and making sure that was the case?
You mean like, for example, you'll be writing for a while, you haven't had any songs picked up, and then so you might find yourself like listening to the radio and seeing what's happening there, like the fear of that happening?
Yeah, and not even listening to the radio as much as just when you're in town and you're in that circuit, you know what people are looking for. Like there's just a sound that a lot of the demos and the records have, and topics and this and that, which are all totally fine, but I just didn't want to default to that. I didn't want to shoot for that specific bullseye. I just wanted to create art that felt good to me and not worry about that.
Were there any older veteran writers that took you under their wing at first?
None that come to mind. I mean, I've definitely made good friends over the years through songwriting. Some of them were older and have been farther down the road, but nobody that comes to mind in that type of role.
In that case, then, did you find it to be a world that could be clicky in a sense, or kind of everyone looking out for their own self-interest?
Man, I think it depends on the people. Like maybe your clique, like maybe I'm in a positive clique, but I've really experienced for the most part, there's a certain amount of humanity that creeps in with all of us, with jealousy and
sure,
and envy and this and that, which are just parts of being a human being. But that said, the circles that I've run in here in Nashville, there's a real strong community of everyone that wakes up and does this. I feel like it does feel like a family, and most of the time people are pulling for everybody. I feel like a healthy person knows that there's room at the table for everybody. And I've experienced a lot of that here for sure.
What was the first song that you had cut by somebody else where you were like, wow, this might be working?
Well, I remember the first day I wrote, the song got put on hold by Trisha Yearwood, and I thought, this is going to be the easiest thing ever. I was like, wow, okay, cool. So you write a song, and then your publisher brings it to somebody, and they put it on hold, and then probably in a couple of weeks, they're going to record it. They're going to be put on a record. It's going to come out. And wow, cool. All right, this is going to be super.
And all I have to do is walk to the mailbox to pick up the check.
Yeah. This is easy. This is amazing. Obviously, that song didn't get recorded. A hold means almost nothing these days, back then.
What is a hold?
So a hold is when an artist hears a song and they can put it on hold, which basically means we are interested in recording the song, and we don't want anyone else to record it. It's kind of a gray area because it's not legally held. They've shown interest, and then you're not supposed to really show it to anybody else. So that kind of, if enough time passes and they haven't recorded the song, your publisher might be like, hey, are you really serious about this? Because we're going to move on if you're not, type of a situation.
That's a weird thing because I don't see what the incentive is on the side. I see what the incentive is on the side of the artist for them to just say, don't show this to anybody else. But I don't see what the incentive is on the publisher and writer side of it to give somebody that type of carte blanche.
Just because it's not easy. I mean, there's so many songs being written every day and pitched that if someone shows interest, that's cutting through a bunch of songs to get even to that point. So I think that they're feeling like if they feel strong enough to put this on hold, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. We'll give them a couple of weeks with this and see if that's really going to happen, because it's hard to get that sort of attention.
So did Trisha Yearwood cut that song?
She didn't cut the song, which is all right. It was a good lesson.
Sure. I mean, in making albums of your own, and I certainly know, you don't know how things come out when you're going to cut them for an album. You don't know the direction that an album's going to take, so you can understand where they're coming from, I suppose.
Oh yeah, and these people too. I mean, there's no telling how many songs they have on hold. You know what I mean? It's a big list for a lot of these people. So, yeah, that's just part of the learning curve.
I bet. So I guess it kind of got to the point where maybe for your first couple writing sessions, you could come in with ideas, but it sounds like you're working so flat out at that point that you would have to be coming to sessions without anything to begin with, right? Like you just go cold.
Yeah. And early on, and I'm trying to talk between two worlds because this is literally 10, 11, 12 years ago when I first started. But early on, I always tried to have something. I had a list of song ideas and lyric ideas, and I tried to be the prepared guy. And I think, especially when you're new and you're walking into a room with someone who's done this for years and they have huge hits or whatever, you want to pay a certain amount of respect to that person and bring and feel like I'm bringing something to the table when you've never done this before. So I definitely had that mentality for a long time. And then fast forward now, I almost never do that for no other reason except for that I feel like the best stuff happens kind of out of the blue for me, for my process.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's not nerve-wracking to you to sit down in a room with somebody and neither one of you have come to you're just kind of, you're just opening a straight up blank page and going.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's now too, which to be fair, I own my own publishing now. I'm not I'm not a staff writer, so there's different expectations. So my priorities may be slightly different, but yeah, now especially, I love that, and I really like writing. I don't co-write half as much as I used to. I really enjoy writing by myself mostly. That's my favorite thing to do. But when I am with somebody, it needs to be, or I should say, I love to create with people where they don't have a bullseye either. Like, let's just get together. I mean, sometimes if one of us has a great idea, like, that's killer, awesome. That's not a bad process, but I just like someone that can be patient and we can come up with something out of the blue and not have something beforehand.
So go back just a little bit. Tell me how, if you're not with that publishing company anymore and not on staff, tell me how that came to an end and how your new chapter started then.
So this would have been maybe 4 years ago, that I had been with the same publishing company for 10 or 11 years, which is kind of a rare thing. We did a lot of great stuff. It just came to an end where, if you don't have a certain amount of action and, things aren't popping and like a year goes by and there's not enough, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's business and, they don't extend your contract.
Oh, gotcha.
So,
okay.
So after 10 or 11 years, that was the situation. We parted ways, which worked really well because I was already starting to feel like I didn't have enough time to split with what I wanted to do as an artist and
yes.
what I needed to do or was expected to do as a writer in that type of deal. So the timing, it felt really good. It was a good thing.
Yeah, because even though, you've recorded a tremendous amount of albums of your own, 13, is that how many you've done so far?
Yeah, this will be the 12th. This new record will be the 12th,
oh, okay.
I believe.
I don't know where I got 13 from, but yeah, it does seem, just as a general awareness of your songs that get played under Sean McConnell, I feel like the last couple of years that's come on my radar and a lot of other people's radar, and that's probably why, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at some point to me, and being in my own head, I've always been like, artist has always been first, has been the main hat. Because during this time of writing for a publishing company, I'm still on the road a lot and making records and that being my focus. But I think there's definitely an energetic switch that I had to flip at some point that was like, here's all the eggs in this basket. This is what I love. And I can't be chasing two rabbits, as they say.
If you listen to this show even just a little bit, you'll know that I'm mildly obsessed with the idea of someone writing the next Amazing Grace, a song that transcends cultures and generations. Recently, I learned that the process of writing that song was actually not unlike what Sean was doing for years on Music Row or what writers did on Tin Pan Alley. That is, Amazing Grace emerged from a practice of writing constantly and in volume. So, what is the story of the genesis of Amazing Grace? The popular narrative is that the song's author, John Newton, was a slave ship captain whose voyage encountered a terrifying storm, whereupon he promised God that if he were spared, he would turn from evil. And when that storm passed, he sailed to shore, released all the slaves, and quit the trade forever. As you might imagine, it's not quite that straightforward. Indeed, Newton did find his Christian faith when he was a passenger on a slave ship named the Greyhound, when the poorly made ship encountered a vicious storm and nearly foundered. And although he would eventually in his life support the abolition movement decades later, his newfound faith did not immediately make him repent the slave trade. And in fact, the time that he spent as a slave ship captain occurred entirely after his conversion to Christianity. From 1748 to 1753, he sailed ships from England to the African coast and then on to the New World slave market. He resigned his captaincy, and this is important to note, not from any moral qualms at all, but only after suffering from violent seizures that made him physically unfit to retain his post. After that, Newton took a job as a customs officer, and he began to tell the story of his conversion to Christianity. Friends found that story so compelling that they prevailed upon him to turn that story into an autobiography. Certain clergy members of the Church of England were so impressed by his story that in 1764 he was ordained as a priest, even though he was without the formal university education that was normally required. He became the clergy at a small parish in Olney, arriving fortuitously at the same time as a troubled, unpublished 36-year-old poet named William Cowper. Cowper is now considered an essential figure in English poetry, a forerunner to the Romantic movement. He was an inspiration to Coleridge and Wordsworth. At the time, though, he was just out of an asylum, unemployed and rootless. Newton and Cowper must have really inspired one another because they began composing hymns for popular after-church meetings that would take place every Sunday in Olney. Now, here's the interesting part. Newton began a practice of writing a hymn every week. And sometime in the December of 1772, one of those weekly hymns was Amazing Grace. At the time, he didn't necessarily recognize it as anything particularly special. In 1779, it was published in the hymnal Olney Hymns under the title Faith's Review and Expectation. A song that was written in a ho-hum weekly practice for a one-off post-worship gathering transcended time and space. In a way, John Newton wasn't doing anything different than Sean was doing in the offices on Music Row, or that any of us could be doing if we chose to sit down and commit ourselves to the same kind of practice. Tell me about, because a fair amount of your songs, of course, as we've been talking about, have been covered by mainstream country acts like Tim McGraw and Rascal Flatts, but you have this whole other devoted following of artists who use your song down in the Texas red dirt scene, like Wade Bowen and Randy Rogers. How did that connection come to be?
The Texas thing, again, like the publishing thing, was just something I stumbled into. So Wade Bowen, who's now one of my best friends, at the time, this would have been around the same time, maybe 9 or 10 years ago. We wrote together in Nashville, just like a cold write. And he knew Alicia Pruitt, who's my publisher at the time, really well. So we hit it off, and he invited me down to open up 2 weeks of shows for him in Texas, and was trying to explain to me that there's this like scene going on in Texas, and I had no idea what he's talking about. I'd never been there, didn't know what the Texas music scene was. So I hopped on his bus. I with, just an acoustic, just opened up acoustic for him for 2 weeks down there. And just got introduced to this whole, it's a whole other musical planet. Like the business works different. The radio works different. The fans hold a lot of responsibility for growing artists, like consciously hold that and take that very seriously. So I was just thrown into this world, and it was just one of those things. And you know how this works. Like, you tour your ass off, and a lot of times you have to tour your ass off for 5, 6, 7 years in a place to really feel like you've done anything.
Oh yeah.
And then there's some rooms or places or states, whatever, that just seem to catch fire, and Texas just really caught fire really quick. It was just one of those things. And when that happened, me and my wife just made the decision, like, we're going to really, let's go where the fire is. So I ended up doing 12 or 13 shows a month, going back and forth from Nashville to Texas for probably that first 3 or 4 years.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was, this is before we had our child. And, so yeah, I was constantly in a van, driving back and forth. And then through that ended up writing, with a lot of these guys. And that just became a whole other thing, just writing a ton of songs with the artists down there on this other musical planet.
Give our listeners a sense of, obviously, if you're going down there to play 12 and 13 shows a month, it's not just Austin, Houston, Dallas. Give our listeners a sense of the different towns in Texas that you've played.
There are so many towns in Texas, and there's 2 venues in every town. So it is, I mean, some of these guys make their living just touring Texas. I mean, genuinely, make amazing livings and have these great musical careers just in the state. So yeah, you've got Austin, but you've got New Braunfels, which is right by Austin, which is one of my favorite places to go. Waco, you got Corpus Christi, and you got Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth. There's so many. I mean,
you ever go out to, have you ever played, what is it? Out in Lubbock, I opened for Joe Ely at the Cactus Theater out there, but there's also a gig in Lubbock.
The Blue Light?
Yes, the Blue Light.
Oh yeah. I haven't played the Cactus Theater. I would love to. The Blue Light is great.
Man, I've never played the Blue Light. I'd love to get out there. Although now that I'm living in Prince George's County, Maryland, I think it'll be less likely than when
it's a little bit of a haul.
Yeah. Yeah. Man.
Yeah. So you were steeped in Austin for a long time. I was. I got to know that scene pretty well, the Red Dirt scene. I think it's really cool. I think it's one of the only genuinely homegrown, like you were saying, the fans have a lot of responsibility for the destinies of these various artists. And I mean, I cannot think of another scene, maybe like the hip hop scene in Atlanta is a little bit like that, but I don't know anything about that. And I tried hip hop for years. I just never broke through. So I just went to.
Yeah, I figured. And then also there seems to be, I don't know if you've noticed this, if this is on your radar at all, but there's a real kind of bluegrass and string band thing going on in Colorado, where I think if you're like a certain type of string band, you can make your living in Colorado.
Yes, I have heard of this a little bit, and it's crazy. It's huge. I mean, the numbers of it's huge. Yeah,
like bands that you would, unless you were really into this scene, you never would have heard of, are straight up headlining Red Rocks. I mean, it's nuts.
Right. Yeah, it's insane. It's so cool. And it's like that.
The Red Dirt thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you're starting to see those guys, like there's a venue in DC now that those guys come through now. So they're starting to be like further outposts around the country for that type of music. It's cool to see.
Yeah. I feel like in every state there's a room or two that like the Texas guys play. Like it's the Texas room for whatever state.
Yep. Because there's so many people that go to college in Texas, get hooked on that music in college, and then, they go on to have their life. But when Wade Bowen comes through town on Wednesday night, they go support, check it out.
Exactly.
My buddy BJ from American Aquarium, his band was almost on the ropes, like they were getting ready to hang it up, and then they got brought down by another band to Texas for the red dirt scene, and it kept them alive for a couple of years before they broke through nationally. Like it really helps artists do what they do. You know what I mean? Like it helps them stay alive.
Yeah, it really does. And it's kind of the opposite. There's such a culture of, so like in Texas, if you go see a band on a Friday night, like you're expecting originals.
Right.
Whereas if you're in college and you're going to see a band you don't know, on a Friday night, you might be hoping for Brick House or whatever.
Yeah, that motherfucker better be playing Santeria Song 3.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it breeds songwriting, which is really cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I would be remiss, given the timing of this conversation. I think we're going to release this episode later, but we're talking in October right now. Man, you just had a song go to number 1. Congratulations.
I did.
What does that feel like?
Man, it feels really good. It really does. I mean, it does. I mean, it's just one of those things you can't plan, and you can't, you just do your thing. And then, all of a sudden someone calls you and they're like, hey man, looks like this thing's going up pretty fast. And we just keep our eyes on it. And yeah, here we are. I just got back last night. We went to, me and my wife went to the industry number 1 party.
Yeah.
And then I got to step up. The artist, Brett Young, the song is called Mercy. Him and I wrote it together. He also played the Ryman last night, and I got up and sang the song with him, which was really awesome.
Holy fucking shit.
Yeah. Yeah, it was sick.
Is it, so there's some things in life that like you have a big expectation of what it will feel like. And it actually comes through. Like I remember for me, like getting my driver's license and driving actually lived up to all the hype that I thought it was.
Right.
But that's like one of the few things that ever did. Like, how did this live up to the way you had imagined it?
Man, those things, I don't know if this is just me, but I was actually talking to my wife about this last night because she said, like, how are you feeling? When really big things happen, I kind of go numb. Like I can't take it in, type of thing. So it's felt a little bit like I'm floating around a little bit right now. Yeah. And I have to practice, like last night, my mantra was like, be present, like take it in, like take in your friends, take in walking onto the stage, like take in giving your thank you speech. And like, let you, reveling in a good moment, Yeah. So
let people give you compliments. Harder thing to do.
Right.
Than it sounds like.
I know it is. I think people always assume that artists like love attention.
Right.
Like songwriters and performers, like we want attention. And I'm not like, there's some artists that you're in a room with and they suck up all the energy. Like they are the show, like they're the man, everybody knows it. And that's not a bad thing. That's just a certain type of thing. I'm more of like a in the shadows guy. I don't hate attention, but I don't crave it. Like I don't want to be the guy in the room everyone's looking at.
Yeah. Just more important to you that they know which address to send the check to.
Right. Exactly.
Look, I'm going to ask this delicately. I don't want you to get into specifics here, but having a number 1 song, is that me and my wife get to buy a new house type of money, or is that like I'm good for the rest of the year type money? How does that
work? I guess it depends a little bit. I've been told this is my first number 1. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between how long it takes to go up the chart. It's how long it stays on the chart will depend on that. But I mean, and it also, the other thing, and again, this is kind of weird to talk about, I suppose, but it's, unless you ask for it in a different way, it's doled out over, through PROs like quarterly. So it's not like here's your check for the number 1 song.
So it's just like your regular BMI or ASCAP quarterly check, just you would notice a spike in it basically.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. I mean, some people do ask for some of it like upfront, like as an advance, and that's like a thing that people do. Sure. But I mean, man, if it's definitely good. I mean, it's I don't know. You can cut out my stumbling because it's weird to talk about money, but
no, and you know, I don't want you to get into any specifics here. I'm just learning that that's how it is doled out is interesting to me. So basically, that means you wouldn't have seen a bump. The last BMI payout was last month, so January is your moment of truth when that check.
Well, and even that, like, I need to look at like how long that pipeline is. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like when it will actually hit. But yeah, it's definitely like a quarterly thing. I mean, it's a big deal. I guess the bottom line, without saying details, it's a game changer. It is a huge gift to our family. It definitely eases up on the, the month to month nervousness a little bit if you play it safe. You know?
No, definitely. I've had this weird thing where every time I have like important like life events where I have to take time off, magically every time the BMI check is like for no reason at all 3 times bigger than it should be. So that's
right.
I've always looked at it as like, the universe gives you, what you need when you need it.
Man, it does. It really does.
This month's episode is brought to you by New West Records, and specifically the new album by Robert Ellis entitled Texas Piano Man.
No, I don't want to be here, and you can keep your margarita. Well, you're gonna be up all night drinking all that Coca-Cola.
Okay, let me tell you a little anecdote about the first time that I knew Robert Ellis was an otherworldly kind of musician and artist. We were doing a tour of Australia together, and Robert and his band had to back up another artist for an entire set, but they hadn't rehearsed any of the songs. So Robert simply had them play their whole set solo acoustic in the green room, and he made charts as they were playing. Then he had the tour manager make copies of those charts, handed them out to his band, and they took the stage having never played any of the songs before, and then proceeded to absolutely murder it. I've never seen anything like it. So his latest album is entitled Texas Piano Man, released last week. Let's take a listen.
Topo Chico and Lime, Topo Chico and Lime, I'll be just fine with Topo Chico and Lime.
The album is entitled Texas Piano Man, out on New West Records by Robert Ellis. Head on over to Spotify to check it out, and then go to newwestrecords.com to buy you a copy. You and I, we hung out a week or two ago in Nashville, and we got a chance to nerd out a little bit. We both have home studios at our place. And you just got to the point where you're able to produce drums at your house, so you're all in now. That's like the final piece of the puzzle there. How long have you been into recording yourself, and how'd you fall into that?
I have been doing it for a long time. I mean, obviously, like everyone else probably from our generation, I had a little Tascam 4-track recorder in high school that I was recording my song ideas on and such. And that's where the love affair started of, wow, I can sing on this track and then I can harmonize with it on this track. I mean, that is such a simple idea to us now.
Yeah.
But that is a game changer, as you know. Like,
oh yeah,
growing up, being able to do anything like that it opens up so many. Like I was bit early by the recording bug. So as the years go by, college, I've got a little Pro Tools rig. I've got a few more microphones. I'm doing not my own records, but another flip side of the publishing thing is a lot of that is like me coming home and demoing the songs myself. So that's like 10 years of kind of boot camp engineering and I mean, sometimes you're in big studios with a budget doing demos, but especially as time goes on, there's a lot more home recording. So that was a huge part of what my process became. And as that progressed, I buy something here, something there over the years, and just kind of build a small but powerful
So
studio.
that's cool.
Over the
So when
years.
you were a staff writer, not only would you be writing a song per day, but to fulfill finishing that song, you'd have to go home and record it and send it on in. So, one of the things I really like about doing this podcast monthly is it forces me to write at least one essay per month. And,
Right.
you get good at it, whether you like it or not, or good at it to the degree that you can be yourself. But it sounds like you kind of found the back way in there with engineering and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's not. I think there's a lot of different approaches. I wasn't just like, hey, I'm going to throw up a mic and record this acoustic guitar and then sing tune SM7 and then send it to the publishing company. I was like up Googling what is this mic placement, early on, like very much attacking it from like, I really want to know all about this. How does this work? So I was equally as fascinated with that part of it as writing the song that day.
Man, the internet really, as it has with everything else, democratized that information. Like, I mean, I'm sure you've noticed traveling around to play music over like the last 10 years. Like now, anywhere you go, there's going to be at least one awesome hipster pour over coffee shop and one amazing like Michelin level restaurant. I mean, maybe they don't actually have a Michelin star, but they're doing like real shit that you only would have seen in Manhattan a decade ago. And, that is the democratization of the information on how to cook. The same thing has really happened with recording. Like if you don't know how to record, the only person that's responsible for that is you, because all the information is there and it's free all day long.
Oh yeah. And not to mention versus maybe when we were starting out, even though it might not be the best, the type of gear that you can buy now and create in your own space, even if you're just getting started, is baffling. Like the technology that people have now when they decide, I'm going to record at my house. You can go to a Guitar Center and you can get some pretty good sound and shit for a couple $100, like to get started. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to learn what you're doing. It's amazing.
And for listeners who aren't musicians themselves or musicians who don't record, basically the big revolution that Sean is talking about there, when you think about a studio and you see a big rack of hardware instruments, the revolution that's happened is all of those, the effects that those racks can produce, they've been modeled by software and algorithms. And now, I mean, you can buy a piece of software for a lot cheaper than you can a hardware thing. So all of a sudden, I mean, you can make, I mean, like you were saying, dude, like you can walk into Guitar Center, spend $1,500 and come out and be able to make a nice singer-songwriter record straight up.
Oh, straight up. Yeah. Yeah. It's really amazing.
The only thing we're missing now, Sean, is limitation.
That is so true.
Could have used some more of that. Yeah.
Yeah. But people learn that on their own.
Oh man. Well, when the unexpectedly huge BMI quarterly check comes in for you in about 6 months, I'll come to Nashville to go API board shopping with you. Okay.
Dude, don't even start with me on the API board. I have got one of the reasons we bought the house that we're in, it has a detached garage in the back that eventually will be a studio, and there will be an API board in there, I promise.
Really? Okay, so if money were no issue and you just had a blank check to go buy a console, you're all in on the API.
Yeah, man. My ear just loves it. Something about that mid-forward kind of steely API thing is definitely one of my favorite sounds. So I would definitely go API for sure.
I like it because of what just mentioned before, the idea of limitation. I like how the EQ, they have these band EQs, and basically you're not allowed every single option for sculpting the EQ exactly how you want it. It's kind of like
Right.
these broad parameters, and you just have to use your ears, and you're limited to the attenuation that it allows you. And it's really, I find that really freeing, and it makes me use my ears a lot more.
Oh, most definitely. The less options I have, the older I get, is better for me. It's like the classic compressors with that LA2A has two knobs on it.
Yes.
That's what I want. And that's what it should be. That's what it does. Too many options. You're going to be messing with it. You're going to miss the song. Just give me a simple piece of gear. That's all I want.
Simple. Yeah. There's two knobs. That's
two
what
knobs.
you want there. I remember I started recording, and I was just within Logic. And so all the compressors there, basically it just pulls up like a window where you can put in different values for what you want the attack and release and input and output to be. And I was like, well, I'm never going to learn how to do this. And then when I started using the software that had two knobs, I was like, well, there's only two things to turn here. So how about I just turn these for 15 minutes until it sounds pleasing to me?
Right.
Like that sounds like making music to me, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That's the way to go for my brain, at least.
So speaking of that type of stuff, you're starting to produce for people a little bit more. How much are you dipping your toe into that role right now?
When I started, so this record that I just finished of my own that's coming out in February, I was at the point where I said, I'm doing this myself. I'm going to put a little more into the studio, and it's going to be ready. And during the same time, I started producing another record for a friend of mine and an amazing artist named Ashley Ray. Her record will be coming out next year as well. And that just started. I've always loved producing. I've always produced someone like maybe one or two records a year that weren't mine.
Oh, really? So this has been an ongoing thing.
Well, yeah, but very limited. I've only done a handful of those. They kind of present themselves throughout the year and be like, yeah, I love this. I'll do that. And this is the first year where it's kind of snowballed a little bit to where, I'm loving it so much. It's becoming an equal passion to everything else that I do. And so, I'm doing 2 or 3 projects right now, which is not normal for me. I'd normally, after I'm done like one record, I'd be done for the year. So it's becoming more of a thing, intentionally, for sure.
What are some parts of that role that don't necessarily come naturally to you that you've had to kind of teach yourself piece by piece?
I think the biggest one, and actually I was listening to your last interview, forgive me for forgetting his name, the very last
Ian McConnell
podcast. Ian. And he was saying that when they went in, the first time they went in to make a record, the producer was trying to make a record that pleased him, but he didn't love the sound of the band.
Right.
And so he was trying to force them to basically sound how he wanted. I think a big lesson as a producer for me is to, we all have tastes that we like, the sonic choices that I would make that maybe the artist doesn't want. And to get into the headspace of, you're making their vision happen,
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's a big one, and it depends on what kind of artist you're working with. And the records I've started doing, they've been very different from this record I did with Ashley Ray. We wrote the whole record together. I played all the instruments. We created it together, and there wasn't much to discuss because it was all happening with both of us in the room. But with another project I'm at, I've been recording this artist. She's playing piano and vocals live at her place, and then I'll bring it back and I'll start building, and I'll send her something and be like, do you like how this sounds? And with that project, my ear isn't always aligned with her ear. So it's just learning the artist and what they're after and how to execute that in a way where you're still, creating something that you're excited about too.
Man, you got your plate full. It sounds like on any given day, you got some art to make, man.
Man, I love creating. I love it, and I love it more and more the more I do it. and production has just given me this whole new world. To do that. So there's a lot of all of it going on right now. And, but still time, it's not crazy. Like I still have a lot of time with my family right now before touring happens with the new record. And, but yeah, much creation going on for sure.
Dude, I'm so glad that we finally got to do this, man.
I know, man. I've been really looking forward to it. I love this podcast. It's crazy that we're talking because I just randomly heard it a few years ago from a buddy who sent it to me, and so I'm glad we got to connect on it. And thanks for putting such an amazing show on for us songwriters. It's a gift.
In some ways, this is exactly why I wanted to create the show. I had a feeling that if I did it, I would be able to connect with like-minded people that were doing this, and it's like, it's funny. I don't think I'd know you if it wasn't for the show. And now it's like here we are talking and getting to, I wouldn't say enlighten one another, but, we're getting to.
That's later.
Yeah, that's for, we're getting to share the few things that we've learned. Like it's getting ready to call you today. I was just reflecting on like, man, this is a good thing that this little program has brought into my life, the ability to have a conversation that I wouldn't have otherwise. So, okay, I got weird and sappy there at the end, but it's good to talk to you, man. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
You too, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'll talk to you soon, Sean. Peace.
All right, brother.
That's our show for this month. Thank you for listening. Sean McConnell's latest album is entitled Secondhand Smoke, available everywhere digital music is sold or streamed. Today's episode was engineered and mixed by Matt Schusler. This episode has been brought to you by associate producer John McGeehan, whose company Capital for Compassion helps finance facilities that deliver housing and services to homeless and very low-income persons. Their latest project is with Helping Up Mission, a new building with 260 beds for women and children in the Jonestown neighborhood of Baltimore. It's also been associate produced by Vinyl Cup Records of Des Moines, Iowa. They started as a boutique shop on Facebook, and now they have a brick and mortar of their own. If you're looking for a well-curated selection of vinyl with fair prices and excellent customer service, stop by facebook.com/vinylcup. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.